Hey everybody, I'm Dane Sanders and I want to welcome you to Fast Track Coaching. This is episode 150. So almost 3 full years done of the show, and really glad you guys are here with us this week. And I'll get to our guests in just a second, but for those of you who are new to the show, let me give you a little bit of context. We have been meeting like this about every week or so for about half hour, me and you all and my guests, and it's meant to be just a very lucid conversation to help encourage and promote your own creativity and your own business, help it move a little further this week. We're not trying to solve the world's problems today, but we all are trying to give you just a couple key things, nuggets or so, that you could take out of this conversation and implement, do something with, to get a better return on your life's investment. Now, the way to participate, of course, is in the chat room at JustinTV/Dane Sanders, or if you'd prefer, you can go ahead and interact on Twitter. My name is @DaneSanders on Twitter, or you can use the hashtag BetterTogether. But without further ado, I want to get into today's conversation because honestly, it's one of the highlights of my year to have this conversation happen and have you guys join it. But my special guest today is Mike Mariner, and please forgive me. What a gaffe that was. But the reason I'm so excited about having Mike Mariner on the show is he's part of a thing called Startup Nation. And if you are familiar with PBS and what the phenomenon that is Startup Nation, you should be very excited for this conversation, especially if you're a free spirit, you want to have a different kind of life than the life that's showing up in your life right now, and you want to get after it. Well, Mike is one of the guys who's been behind this from the very beginning. He was on the green RV at the very first year. He's logged some serious miles, and he's learned a couple things about what it means to identify what you're made to do uniquely and to live it out. And so first of all, Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here.
Sure. Thanks for having me.
So Mike, educate us a little bit about Road Trip Nation and how it came to be, and what got you to this place today.
Sure. So Road Trip Nation today is a movement that is empowering young people to explore the world around them and really kind of set out to define their own roads in life. It started not as like a big grand master plan or business plan or anything like that. It started with me and my two buddies were basically in school and didn't really know what we wanted to do with our futures, like a lot of people, and just kind of felt underexposed as to what was out there and didn't really know what types of pathways even existed. And it's funny because you're in school and you're learning all this great, useful information, but some of those big questions aren't really being answered very well. And we were kind of looking for someone to answer some of those bigger life questions. And so our idea was pretty simple. Let's get an old beat-up motorhome and paint it green because the green paint was on sale at Home Depot, and take off across America and just interview people from all walks of life and ask them what are the steps that they've taken to get where they are today? What are the stories that they've traveled, and what are the insights and lessons and failures they've had, and how did they learn from those failures? What risks did they take? You know, where were they at before they had found their roads in life, and they were in that kind of groveling period where they were searching and trying to figure out who they were? How did they get through that period of ambiguity, and what insights and lessons did they learn along the way? So we spent 6 months just preparing and building this trip, you know, fixing the RV, booking the interviews, planning the route, and then the actual trip itself was like 3 months long. And on the road, we got a little bit lucky, so we ended up meeting someone in New York City who knew a writer for Forbes magazine. So Forbes ended up doing this kind of very small article on Road Trip Nation, like maybe 2 inches, but it got the attention of an editor at Random House, a woman named Allison, and she was like, oh, this could be an interesting book. So we ended up partnering with Random House to do our first book, Road Trip Nation. The book came out maybe a year and a half after our first road trip. It didn't sell very well at first. It was like the 600,000th best-selling book in America or something like that. And but then the publisher got behind it. We were like on the Today Show and CNN and Carson Daly Show, and the book took off. It became like the 15th best-selling book in America at one point.
Wow.
And then around that time, the publisher, trying to take advantage of the book sales, put us on this kind of national tour to schools all across America. We were kind of speaking and sharing our story. And this is really when we had our epiphany for Road Trip Nation, which was that, you know, rather than Road Trip Nation just being about us sharing our experiences, I never thought we never really wanted to be just talking about our first road trip 20 years later, we're old and, we did this road trip.
Right.
So we thought, what if Road Trip Nation was bigger than a book? And what we were also seeing is when we were speaking to these kids in high schools and colleges, we soon learned that we weren't the only kids in school who were feeling like not really knowing what we wanted to do with our futures. And also a lot of the students who we were speaking with were like, that's awesome that you had that experience, but I don't really want to live vicariously through your road trip. I want to have my own experience. And that's when we started realizing in American culture, we don't have anything socially here that allows people or gives young people the space to explore and figure out who they are and what's out there in the world. And other cultures like, the Kiwis or in Australia, they have the gap year. It's very cultural to kind of take some time off, explore the world. In past civilizations like Native Americans, go out, kill the bear, come back, and there's also much more, in previous cultures, there's also much more heritage in terms of reaching out to your elders and asking them how did they get to where they are. But for some reason in our age today, in our generation, like young people are skipping that step in terms of figuring out who they are, and there's not enough opportunities to connect with your elders and learn. So I think what we tapped into with Road Trip Nation was not really something that's totally new. It's just something that's been kind of covered up for the last few generations maybe, and we're trying to unearth it. And we kind of came across it very instinctually in our experiences, but when we started speaking with kids on these schools, we started to realize, what if Road Trip Nation can be bigger than a book? What if it could be this real grassroots movement that gave other youth the opportunity to build their own road trip experiences? And that kind of started the long journey of the last 7 years, basically building Road Trip Nation to exist on many different levels, colleges, high schools, the TV series, all the stuff that we do.
Well, this is such a great entry point on so many levels. Number one, if you're at home and you're watching this and you're used to me talking to photographers or kind of classic entrepreneurs, and you're tuning in right now, I have a hunch you might be asking, okay, that's all really cool if I was a college student, but I'm not a college student anymore. I'm a 30-something, and I'm trying to make a small business work, and maybe I'm a photographer, I'm a graphic designer, I'm whatever. Why would I want to get into this conversation? Well, I would argue, and the reason I got so excited to have Mike on when I first heard about Road Trip Nation was there's something in your ethos and your spirit that really does align with what some of the things that we've been talking about in the fast track universe for a while, and a lot of that is around self-discovery, building whatever pursuit you're after, whether it be for-profit, non-profit, whatever. And in our world, a lot of us happen to be photographers, but there's kind of this ethos of figuring out what I was made to do uniquely, and then having the gumption and the craziness to jump off the cliff and go do it. And so if you're at home going like, why are we in this conversation? The reason we're in this conversation is we have a lot to learn as entrepreneurs about this kind of lost art of self-discovery and action. And I would, so that's for you guys who are at home going like, what the heck? And then for you, Mike, in this conversation, my invitation is for you to be really honest with us about what you've been discovering, because I have a hunch that it's not all pretty out there. That the adventure theoretically can sound great. Like, who doesn't want to go on a road trip? You guys are living the dream. You guys, you got the idea. You got the green van. You went for it, and then somebody gave you a book deal and got you on TV. I mean, it's pretty great.
Yeah, no problem.
Yeah, no problem. But as you're talking to someone at home who's sitting by himself in front of a TV screen or computer screen, trying to sort through, gosh, how am I going to keep this ethos? Because I know I was made for something. Yet I'm feeling this tension of real life, of a tough economy, how to make this work. How do you keep those kinds of ideals alive in the context of real life, as based on what you've learned and gathered? Because you've met a lot of people and seen people go on a lot of trips. Talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I mean, it's funny. When you look back retrospectively, you just kind of give like the cliff notes,
Sure.
And it is funny how a lot of what, there's a lot of struggling. And for 5 years, we lived in green motorhomes going across the country, and we're, living on credit cards. And even just that first road trip, a lot of people think we had some PBS funding or some sponsor or some rich uncle or something. But we were broke. We funded on credit cards. We each took out credit card, gas cards, and we went 30 grand in credit card debt. So we don't really talk about that very much just because we don't want to preach like fiscal irresponsibility to students and whatnot. But I mean, yeah, that was the reality of it, and we had no food. So one of our first interviews was the founder of Cliff Bar, Gary Erickson. He's like, "What do you guys? What are you gonna eat?" We're like, "We don't really know yet." And it was literally the first day of road trip because he gave us 2,000 Cliff Bars to take with us. So
that is awesome.
We filled up our entire motorhome with Cliff Bars, and for 3 months we lived on Cliff Bars. Like, we had like the berry flavor in the morning, the peanut butter flavor for lunch, like the chocolate mint swirl for dinner. But that's just kind of how we did it, And I think it's important to kind of celebrate those groveling periods. In American culture, we're so obsessed with success and now someone's a professional photographer or whatever. But you don't really. It's important to celebrate those groveling periods of the truth, like you said, of people's stories, and because it so often gets kind of pushed under the rug, and especially in our space, like we're trying to inspire young people to reach out and engage with their futures. And a lot of the communities we work in are very low income communities where students are high risk of dropping out of school. Many of them have been adjudicated at one point. They're in continuation schools, which is for second chance kids who've already dropped out. In those areas, what are the reasons why they're dropping out of school? What are the reasons why they're disengaging from society? And one of the things that we're seeing is that because a lot of the messages that American culture gives kids that here's everyone, their successful lives over here, but it doesn't show the roads that they've taken to get there. And so when you break it down to kind of how, well, actually this person started, at a very groveling point as well, or this person had ADD, or the CEO of JetBlue, who. He seems the CEO of JetBlue now, but he had pretty severe. David Nealman has pretty severe learning disorder. The track coach at UT Austin, who has tons of Olympians. She was a homeless youth at one point, oldest of 6 kids. Had to help get her younger kids through school. Little things like that it's important to unearth. And what happens when we're honest about those stories is it creates common ground, especially for those kids to go like, oh wow, like I'm not the only one who's stuck and doesn't know what I want to do with my future. But when you look at it honestly, it's actually part of everyone's personal story, and part of people's story, kind of journeys through life when they look back retrospectively is how they got through those periods and the lessons learned along the way.
Let me interrupt for a second because there's a lot of richness in what you're saying, and some of the keys that I'm picking out is both in your own experience and in the experience of the people that you've had the chance to interact with, there are some common threads, one of which being at some point in the game there was massive risk where you had to kind of take this vision for what you wanted to do and put it on the line in a very inconvenient, unsubsidized, ununderwritten way. And there was no guarantee of success. I mean, you could have just gone on a 3-month road trip and then gone home and be done. And on some level, that's probably more likely, but there's something, at least that's what I'm making up in my mind. But what I'm also noticing is by putting yourself in that position and, providentially seeing some things come your way and all that, that sort of thing, you've now been put in a position where you're empowering other people to identify risk and not let risk get the better of you, but to really test, gosh, if this is really my vision for where I want to go with my life, is it not worth risking it all in the hopes that I'll run into a guy with a bunch of Cliff Bars. So that's the first thing that struck me, and I want to make sure I'm in line with what you're saying. So one is around the commonality of risk, that's universal. Number 2, doing it alone versus doing it with others makes a big difference.
Yeah, it's huge.
That if other people have done it, can do it, will do it, that there's a better chance that you might. And there's tons of sociological studies on those ideas of, kids who believe that they could do stuff tend to do better, and people who believe that they can't tend not to. And so that's another piece that's striking me. But the third piece is actually the one that's most interesting to me, because you guys aren't just when you made this transition from, hey, I want to tell my story, to I want to actually empower other people to take the same level of gamble that you guys took on yourselves. It's A-okay, by the way, if anyone wants to join us. No problem. Howdy.
You can come in and work if you want.
What are you doing?
I'm on a Skype interview.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, this is Kelsey.
Hey, Kelsey.
Works with me.
How's it going?
Can't see me, I don't think.
You can come in and work in here if you want.
That's okay.
Okay.
I'll come back.
They're busy
Sorry.
people. So that last piece of just not making it about your own story, but it seems to me that one of the reasons why it would be interesting to a guy at Forbes, and it would be interesting for Random House, and it would be interesting for PBS to get involved in this, is it wasn't just this kind of about you story, but you created value for other people. So in my mind, that is resonant with the small business owner who might be lamenting, gosh, it's harder to get business right now. And I wonder if some of that has to do with them making it about them getting business versus them creating enough value for other people to just want to get involved. And again, that's a bit of a leap, I guess, on my part, but I'm struck by all three of those pieces as pretty pivotal. Tell me, is there a resonance with what I'm saying in that, number one? And number two, what's missing? Is there any kind of recipe or, and that's way too truncated, I understand, but is there any kind of like characteristics that are consistent that you've seen in successful Road Trip Nation lives?
Yeah, I mean, that's why that first road trip was so special, I think, because we got to interact with all these different leaders all across the country, and they kind of imparted their wisdom of where they were at, right at the same time where we were. And that's the best advice I could give anyone. And it's basically the founding rationale behind Road Trip Nation today, is like giving people the opportunity or empowering or inspiring them to go out and reach out and speak with people who are in fields that you want to go into, and take them out for a cup of coffee and ask them, how did you get to where you are today? It sounds simple, but it can be the most profound experience of your entire life. And it was for us. And, you know, when we got back from that trip, we had all those people's stories and insights and lessons kind of in the back of our heads. And one of them, I mean, I could speak all day about that, but one of them in particular was a guy named Michael Jagger up in Burlington, Vermont, who started a design firm called JDK Design. It was like the first design firm for Burton snowboards. Cool. And it was really pivotal and kind of like creating the ethos for the snowboarding movement with Jake Burton back in the day. And he said, you know, when you magnify what it is you believe in and you do it with distinction and you wear it on your shoulder, the world conspires to support you on your path. And that was
That's
a big
powerful.
deal. Yeah, it was powerful for us because it was like, okay, like, it said two things really, which was like, find something you believe in, you know, and then when you find something you believe in, if you magnify it and just, you know, wear it on your shoulder and do it with distinction, then the world conspires to support you. And that's kind of the leap of faith part, you know, you have to kind of believe that the world will conspire to support you. But, you know, what it meant to us was like, maybe the degree to which you really believe in it, you know, has a direct result on the degree to which the world conspires to support you, because there's some positive attractive energy there or something. I don't really know the answer to that, but that's kind of how it worked for us. Like when we got back from that road trip, we just couldn't help but think, why doesn't every kid in our culture go through some kind of experience like this? It's insane. And we were like, other people in our generation have to experience this in some way, and that's what we believed in, and we really magnified it and put it out there, and things started kind of happening. You know, we had the Forbes article thing, and, you know, but I mean, even in the period of writing the book, I mean, we were starving, living in garages, living in a motorhome. I mean, the whole thing, you know, we were writing the book and starving and the whole thing. Yeah. But that was just all kind of part of it. But I think it comes back to the belief in what you're doing. That's why the discovery component is really, really key. Discovering something you really believe in. And another quote was a guy named Randy Komazar, who is kind of an entrepreneur of sorts in Silicon Valley, and he said, don't worry about figuring out what you want to do with the rest of your life. He said, just engage in what truly motivates you now. And that was very freeing as well, because a lot of people get lost in trying to figure out, well, I don't really know what I want to do with my life, you know? And it's like,
don't you think some of that, though, Mike, is people just afraid of trying and failing? Like if they declare, or the fear of commitment. I mean, the classic adolescent challenges that we all face throughout our whole lives. I mean, I don't know, maybe not, but I'm with you. That idea of like, gosh, trying to take on the world's solutions in today is a little overwhelming. I had a story once. My son was he got back from kindergarten, and he said he'd been gone for like 6 hours, and I said, Drew, how was your first day at school? And he goes, Dad, I was there for 6 hours. It would take me 6 hours to tell you how my first day was. And I just laughed when he was in kindergarten and he put it together. But at the same time, why invite the future world problem when we got a lot going on today? But say more about that idea of of staying present and being passionate about what is so for you today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we interviewed I didn't interview this person, but one of the students who came after us interviewed a mountain climber in Yosemite, and he said, the real key to mountain climbing is, you take it one section at a time. If you looked at the entire face of Half Dome, you would freak out. You would never do it. But he's like, you take this section and then that section. And it seems like most people get so paralyzed by the entire vision of their entire life that they kind of freeze. But yeah, the idea of just kind of taking it bits by bits and identifying the basics. What are the things that you really believe in, the things that you love to do and exercising that, exploring that. I think another interview we had was with a woman who is the head stylist for Madonna and Lenny Kravitz, and she does the costume designs for like Walk the Line and all that kind of stuff. Well,
wow.
She said, it was interesting. Like, she got into costume design, all that kind of thing, and then she went home to her where she grew up in Santa Cruz, and she was looking through some boxes of stuff when she was a kid, and she came across all these drawings in journals of her drawing different clothes, little dresses and like dresses, hairstyles, bikinis, jeans, and she was like, it was like the perfect thing that like I've known what I've wanted to do all along.
Right.
It just took me so many years to kind of get back to that natural interest and belief that I had. So I think for a lot of people it's there. It's just kind of unearthing it, and like you said, like having the confidence and not being afraid to fail and just kind of giving it a shot.
Well, I want to be respectful of your time, and we started a little bit late today, but I do have one last kind of round of questions, and this is a little bit selfish for my industry's sake, but if I kind of like to flip the table. So let's say I'm on Road Trip Nation, and I get a chance to interview you, and on many levels, I mean, you're like the people that you were interviewing, except for now you're a future, you're your future self. And given what you know now, if you were to start out fresh, like no green buses, no sweet staff in a great location, no TV show, no books, no nothing, but all the knowledge that came from those experiences, and you were like, okay, I got 90 days to start up right now. I got 90 days to go do my passion, and we could even locate it around something specific like an entrepreneurial pursuit, like a photography business. What would be the first thing you'd be doing, pragmatically, in the first 90 to 6 months, 90 days to 6 months of your new career?
I would, and I think I kind of talked about this a little bit, but like I would just start cold calling people who are doing whatever it is you want to do, and just say, you know what, I am passionate about photography. I'm passionate. Can I take you out to a cup of coffee and just learn, or take you out to lunch or for a beer or something? Just kind of learn from your personal story. I'm not asking for a job. I'm not asking for money. I'm not asking for an internship. I just want to learn from your story. And
so who buys the coffee then?
You buy the coffee. Yeah, yeah. I mean, spend 90 cents, buy someone a cup of coffee, and and people will say no. And that's okay too. And I think that was part of the spirit of our first road trip, was that like most people said no. But you look back on it and like, but the people that said yes are the ones that you remember. And that's what I think a lot of people are missing, is like create a list of 10 people, like whatever industry or field you're in, and ask if you can take them out for a coffee and ask them how they got to where they are. And 7 will say no, 3 will say yes, but those 3 conversations will give you enough empowerment and belief and engagement to kind of like persist, and specific lessons and insights. They might know some people that can help you along the way, maybe not, that's not really as important. Or they might show you that you don't want to do that. You might be
That's
like,
right.
hell no, get me out of here, But either way, that is like maybe the quickest, I think a lot of people overlook that. They get online, they go on blogs, do all this stuff. It's good to do it old school. Go old school, and don't forget about the people who have traveled those roads. Like, don't reinvent the wheel. Like, go straight to the source.
And my guess is too. I mean, I know we had lunch before this meeting happened. By the way, in case you guys are wondering, the reason I have a green door behind me and so does Mike is we're in the same building, but the glory of technology. We went back to old faithful Skype. But at lunch, we were talking a little bit about people who do kind of road trip nation in their own backyard. They don't get on an RV, but and some of that's kind of what you're describing right now is do exactly what you were doing, but whether you get a bus or not is kind of optional. You could do that in Morton, Illinois, as much as you could do it in Los Angeles, California. But how do you I know what you're describing. In fact, this conversation is coming out of me asking you if we could have a conversation. So I get it. And at the same time, I also, what's ringing in my ears, my friends who are listening who are going like, yeah, but how? Like, and what I'm hearing you say, just so we're crystal clear, is you get on the phone, you get on the email, you go on their door, you knock. If
Cold
they don't
call.
answer, you knock again.
Yeah.
You do whatever it takes
Yeah.
to get in the conversation.
Yeah, cold call. We survived on cold calls. That was like and even when we started Road Trip Nation, like it's not like, the book came out and we were freaking on our way and stoked. And I mean, the book came out, we were still broke. I mean, we made
Right.
2 cents a book or something like that.
Right.
And we wanted to build Road Trip Nation, and so that was a huge chapter of Road Trip Nation that I just kind of skipped over. But it was, building Road Trip Nation. We had to cold call organizations to partner with. We had to find people to fund our PBS series production. I mean, and we used all of those exact same skills. We might as well have been cold calling on our first road trip, trying to get the snowboard designer in Burlington to sit down with us. I mean, it's the same kind of process of not being afraid to fail. Putting it out there. You're going to be afraid to fail, but not letting that kind of impede you from actually doing it. And just being very open and honest and honest with where you're at. And it's good to say you don't have it all figured out. I think that was actually part of what worked for us, was being transparent, and that we are totally messed up. We are lost. We have no idea. And people can relate with that part in their life where they didn't know what they wanted to do. And it kind of humanizes the experience because you put them back on your own shoes, and people can relate with that. If you call them and you're like, oh, I'd like to job shadow you or do a day in the life, I don't think that's as human and is. I think that's where the Road Trip Nation approach, what we think makes it important, is the human component, like boiling it down to that place where you don't know what you want to do and being transparent with that and tapping into that experience that someone else can relate with, where they also didn't know what they wanted to do. Then there's some natural bond there, and there's a lot of power in that kind of connection.
That's great. Well, if you're at home and you're intrigued to find out more, be sure to jump online. I'm guessing it's the best place to go, Mike, to Road Trip Nation. Is it .org or .com?
We have a .com and an .org, so roadtripnation.com is the site for our PBS series if you want to check out like our past episodes and stuff like that. Roadtripnation.org, we have a new educational curriculum that's focused on low-income communities, helping kids in East Fresno and Oakland and North San Diego kind of build local road trip projects.
Awesome.
So if teachers want to bring it in your school or youth programs, that's roadtripnation.org.
And if they want to follow on Twitter, it's at Road Trip Nation?
Road Trip Nation.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, thanks again for being on the show, man. So
right.
So stoked to be in the same hood and to get to know you a little bit better, and keep doing what you're doing. You're inspiring the nation right now, so I appreciate you.
Thanks, dude.
All right,
okay.
take care.
See ya.
Bye-bye.
Bye.